Okay. Yeah, thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll get this kicked off. It looks like the majority of the attendees are present now. Um, thanks for joining us. This is the first of several calls until this whole crisis is over to help support you guys. The the main gist of this call will be to just share ideas, see what people's situation is currently, and to answer each other's questions, and also to help shape future calls like this. So this is a fairly broad call, and other calls might be more fine-tuned in their topics. Um, so we've got a little bit of an agenda. I'll just cover that first, so we all know what's going to happen. And first, we'll just do a quick tutorial of this tool, Zoom. Many of you are probably already using it for your own meetings, since we're all in the remote work world these days, but we'll cover that very briefly. We'll go over some basic ground rules, just how we'd like you to treat each other and us. We'll give you a little update on the status of the industry, mostly focusing on the gym closure counts. And then we'll dive into our discussion, and we'll be discussing today staffing questions and issues that seem to be a very hot topic for the comments and questions that were coming into us in preparation of this meeting. We'll have a time allotted for people to ask questions and give answers based on their closure situation and how they're dealing with their members. And then we'll have another section where people can discuss the impact of COVID-19 on their businesses. And then we'll just give you an idea of what the CWA has been doing for the last few weeks, and then what you can expect from us going forward as we all work through this crisis together. So for Zoom, again, many of you have used it, and this is what you should be seeing on your screen, so it might be a little bit of a mirror effect right now. But the important thing I wanted to point out is that you can hit the escape button to get out of full screen really easily, and then if you need to get to any other applications on your computer. There's also audio controls in the bottom left, so if you need to adjust your speakers or your microphone, that's where you find those controls. There's also a chat function. You can chat directly to the panelists. We have a number of people who volunteered to more actively participate in this call. And you can either chat with them directly, or you can chat with everybody. The next feature I'll cover is the question and answer. This will be the main area where you guys can type in your questions. You can answer each other, type in your answers there. You can also upvote questions. So if you see a question that you want to ask, rather than typing it in a second time, please just upvote it, and that'll make sure that that question gets asked during this call. And then the last feature is the raise hand feature. So right there in the bottom of your screen, you'll see the option to raise your hand. Once we ask a question, we'd love to hear from everybody on this call. So what we'll do is we'll try to grab the first person to raise their hand to share their opinion. And what you'll see when we call on you is a little pop-up that will show that we're unmuting you. And then you just need to click unmute myself, and you'll be ready to talk. And that leads us to the ground rules. We'd like everyone, obviously, to be polite and respectful. When you are speaking, please try to limit your comments to 2 minutes, just so everyone gets a chance to talk who would like to speak. We'd like to keep the personal political commentary down as much as possible. A lot of different regions, a lot of different local and national issues that people could discuss, but we'd like to focus on just the business side of this for this call. Anyone who is abusive towards anyone else in the chat section or on when they're unmuted, we'll obviously remove them to keep this conversation productive and moving forward. Right now, there's 44 states where climbing gyms have reported closures. This is specific to climbing gyms. Some of those are voluntary, some of them are mandated by the state. 26 states so far, as of today, have mandated gym closures. And there's several states that have no reported climbing gym closures at this point. That will probably evolve, and we'll try to keep any of that data we have accurate on a daily basis, since things are changing so fast. So the first area of discussion will be around staffing issues. We had a bunch of questions about how to handle your employees during this crisis. And before we jumped into answering any questions that anyone will be typing in, we'd just like to have some common and shared definitions for when we talk about the staffing issues. People will be talking about layoffs, and that's a termination of your employee. They'll no longer be on your payroll. You won't owe them any benefits. And of course, after the crisis ends, you can rehire them. It's very similar to firing someone, but it does allow them to be eligible for unemployment benefits, depending on the state law and that individual's term of employment usually. A lot of people will be talking about reducing hours. There's different rules in different states for non-exempt versus exempt employees. I think most often this will be affecting part-time employees for a lot of folks. And the last category that will come up quite a bit, I assume, is furloughs. That is basically an agreement between you and your employee that you're not going to ask them to work for you, so they shouldn't be doing any work, and you won't be paying them. They may still be eligible for benefits depending on your state, and they still would have the ability to use any paid time off or paid sick leave. Again, somewhat dependent on states, but that's pretty broad. So these are the definitions as we go into talking about staff. So, yep, feel free to start typing in your questions, and we'll start surfacing them. One of the first questions we got this morning in response to the call was, once employees have filed for unemployment, should employers not give them any work at all, since this has to be reported? So that's a question that you might want to discuss, obviously, with your lawyer, and pay a lot of attention to your state and local codes. But if anyone has anything they'd like to say about that specific question, now would be the time. Feel free to raise your hand, or our panelists can also jump in. All right. Oh, I did have a question. Will this deck be shared after the call? And I'm sorry, I did skip over that. We are recording this, so we will have the entire call available for the community to access, and we can share the slide deck as well with anyone who would like it. All right. Let's see, we have a comment in the chat. I'll surface it for any of our Canadian friends, that in Canada, those who are not working do not need to have termination to receive financial support. That is something that I guess I'd touch on, that depending on what state you're in, a lot of departments of labor have loosened their unemployment benefit restrictions. So in cases where you're reducing hours, if you are in certain states, Washington, for example, those employees could be eligible for some unemployment benefits. All right. Looking at other questions here, let's try to keep this on the staff side of things. We have a question. Someone would be curious if anyone is keeping their staff on during closure without a work status change. Is anyone in that camp? All right. Got one person who would like to speak on that. Lillian, yeah, you can go ahead and share your thoughts.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Lillian from Sport Rock Climbing Centers in Virginia. I have about 10 employees who are hourly, but they work 20 plus hours. Currently, both facilities are closed. I'm definitely keeping the full-time on salaried paid right now, but those hourly, I'm still paying them through the end of the month, to be determined after that. And I just sent that out and have gotten overwhelming thank you for those employees. And most of those employees have been with me for a while. So for those 20, 25 hour plus hourly employees, I'm taking care of them through the end of the month.
All right. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Let's see who else we have here. Chris Brown. Let's see what your situation's like.
Yeah, Vertical Ventures is in a similar boat in Florida. We're keeping all staff on for at least the next pay period, which is a 2-week pay period, and then we'll reevaluate after that.
All right. And let's hear from Emily Buckley.
Hey everyone, this is Emily from the Cliffs Climbing, based out of New York. We had a mandatory shutdown as of Monday at 8 p.m. Our intention right now is to continue paying our part-timers for as long as we possibly can at 70% of what their normal hourly average is. And that's with, we're hoping that that can last us through the end of April, and that's with our HQ team taking some pretty significant pay cuts to make that happen.
All right, and let's get Matt Roberts. Looks like his hand is raised. Would you like to share some thoughts, Matt? No? Okay. Hey, Wes, what's your situation in Southern California? All right.
Right now, we're under mandatory shutdown for the now, as of this morning. We have kept on a variety of all of our full-time salaried and a good chunk of our hourly, so about 25 employees total. And we're just trying to keep them all busy doing a lot of outreach. We actually blocked off a bunch of the staff and had them helping the rest of the staff that we had to furlough file for unemployment, because it can be pretty daunting by yourself. And that had the added benefit of our staff helping the rest of the staff. I think one issue that I think we're gonna all face pretty quickly, our shutdown is through the middle of April, is the staff that you keep are actually going to start feeling, we've had it, we're going to have to talk about it on Monday. They're going to start feeling a version of survivor's guilt from the rest of the staff that are not able to be employed right now. And for their morale, I think it's really important to address that issue. They might not talk about it, but they're definitely feeling it. And I think for a bunch of our employees who've never been through a recession or an economic slowdown before, I think they're going to look to us for guidance on how to navigate those emotions and those thoughts. The other thing that I would say is in California, as Garnet mentioned, there's partial unemployment that people can earn. And so actually, we're trying to encourage as many employees as possible to get on those unemployment rolls so that later, if that money starts to run out, they're in line and they're starting to collect on. People shouldn't forego that support by staying on our payroll if they can get it now.
Thanks, Wes. Let's hear from Kristen Horowitz.
Hey guys, one of the things that was sort of spoken about but not very clearly is there is, at least in the United States, although I believe Canada's got it too, a work share program for at least most of the states that I've looked at. And that speaks to what Wes was saying. It's between 20 to 40% workplace reduction hours. You can pull unemployment while keeping your employees and or yourself, if you're on payroll, employed. So you can put, you're going to be paying, say you reduce the hours of somebody who's salaried, up to 60% of that is you paying, and then the unemployment will take, I can't remember what it was. It's a ratio of what you would be getting, but you're still, so they're going to be getting a supplement on top of the reduced work hours. So you should look into that.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen, for clarifying that. I'd also say that several states are implementing emergency procedures as well to make those kind of benefits more accessible than they would normally be as well. So definitely pay attention to your local Department of Labor, your state Department of Labor. Let's get Matt Roberts in the mix. If he's ready.
All right. Sorry about that earlier. Thank you, Garnet.
Mm-hmm.
So we're Five Life. We've got 3 gyms in Columbus, Ohio. We were very aggressive and open about it with our community. We shut down Sunday night. We laid off 63 of our 66 staff on Monday. I've had, and I'm also the one who's been collecting the information about gym economic damages across the country. A couple points I want to make as people do think through this on the business side. And is it okay to make a couple observations on these decisions, Garnet, financially?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I don't want to jump out of order. Couple things to keep in mind. The first is most projections are this is not a 2-week thing. We see a lot of people saying we're going to, we're closing, the governor's mandated we close till April 1st, and then, we'll see. Everything I've seen leads me to think that we should all be planning for at least an 8-week, in other words, mid-May. We could open earlier than that. But I think that if you're planning, if your business case on your current decision rests on reopening before mid-May, I think that's a very aggressive assumption. The other thing to remember is when you're prioritizing these decisions, first of all, payroll is one of the very few areas that you can't push off. Like you can just call your landlord and say, I'm not paying. You can call this long list of vendors and say, I'm just not paying this month. Because it's going to take them months to figure out if they're going to, what they're going to do, what the recourse is. Your payroll processor will not make the disperses checks unless they receive the money out of your account first. So it's an actual cash draw. That is crucial. It's crucial to think of all your bills in that way. The first thing I would recommend everybody do is sit down, look at all your sources of cash. So that is cash in the bank, credit lines, credit card availability. Organize it by interest rates. The next thing to do is calculate your burn rate. Under your current status, how long can you operate before you exhaust your sources of liquidity? Because ultimately, it doesn't matter your assets. Right now, I also work on a bank. I'll have to leave this call in 40 minutes to jump on a bank call. Banks are not lending to small businesses. Those sources of liquidity have dried up. There's a tremendous amount of fear in the lending industry. You cannot rely on it. If you can get it, and there are some, but there is a tremendous amount of fear in the lending industry right now. If you don't have it in your account, you can't rely on it being in your account. So think through your burn rate. Remember, payroll is the one area that you cannot fudge. We had to be decisive because we do have an 85% complete climbing gym in Pennsylvania that we are making payments on. So we were forced, our staff has been great. I'd like to underscore what Wes said about survivor guilt. We kept 3 on, and I know 2 of them have already dealt with, and we've had to really talk to them about those issues, and it's been very hard on them.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all of that, Matt.
Hey, Garnet, I wanted to just add on to what Matt said. I've been using the analogy of like a hurricane to try to explain what's going on. And for those of you who haven't started to prepare, the only real advice I want to give on this and really implore you to do it is plan. And plan for this to be really, really, because if you get it right, everyone's going to thank you. You planned early. If you get it wrong, your house is gone, and you might take flack for planning too early, but you'll live with that. Because if you plan and it's too late, everything's gone, and there's nothing to talk about. So I can't stress enough how much you should take Matt's advice and just start looking at your finances and preparing for this to go a long time.
To add to that, if I can, a couple little things really quick to add to that. Exactly what Wes said. A couple points here to add to that. You can always think about reversibility in these decisions. I can always, if this goes away fast, I can rehire my staff and give them bonuses. If this lasts 4 months instead of 2 months, I can't retroactively fire them and claw that cash back. And that's important. There's an irreversibility. The other thing is we talk about, I don't know who else has filled out their SBA disaster loan, this $2 million working capital application. When you go through this process, what you realize is there is nothing in that application process that deals with your current situation. This is all background paperwork, tax returns, identity, corporate structure. Historically, those funds have not become available to businesses until they have multiple meetings with an SBA loan officer, not a loan officer at a local bank, an employee of the SBA. They historically have taken 2 to 6 months to fund. So do not look at that and think this is what's going to save me. That is not the case.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. We've got one other hand from Brian Pleta, so we'll hear from him, and then we might move on to another question. I just wanted to mention as well, we'll probably be surfacing polls throughout the entire call. So if you see the poll pop up on your screen, please click through on that and share your opinion and your opinion. Yeah, so go ahead, Brian.
Thank you, Garnett. This is Brian Pleta with Sunday Gym in Albuquerque. Going back to the original question of if we're keeping our staff on or not. But right now, we're keeping everybody on, and I think we're going to reassess that as things unfold. We decided to close on Monday, which was our normal billing date for memberships for the month. I've been tracking what other gyms are doing regarding membership billing and trying to encourage our local community to support us during this time. And I think our decision on whether or not we're going to keep people on or not over the long term will really greatly hinge on that community support. And just kind of ask a follow-up question on this, I guess, what people are doing with the opt-in versus opt-out of membership billing. We've kind of been thinking about that over the last couple of days. Like I said, we have not billed for March yet. We plan on doing that next week. And trying to formulate some communications right now to our members. And at least at this point in time, my leaning is to go with the opt-out approach of billing, but with additional communication to our membership to give them every opportunity to opt out if they need to opt out, but otherwise we're going to probably bill them as normal next week.
Great, thank you, Brian.
And then I think in addition to email communications, we'll probably actually make physical calls to everybody as well.
All right, and I saw Kristen's hand went up, so let's hear from you, Kristen.
Yeah, I know you're trying to wrap this up, but I think that it actually translates to the next steps.
Okay.
So some of you guys one of the things that, in terms of calculating what you can and cannot do, actually go and talk to the banks if you guys have loans. There's a little discussion going on in the chat about it. I went and checked in. We have, we've been open for 2 years. We have a huge loan out, and our banker was literally prioritizing us for SBA. She's trying to figure out what she can do in terms of payment. One thing I'd encourage you to do is make sure you can stay clean with that so that you can qualify for more care as needed. Same thing with subscriptions. Make sure you are going in and looking at all non-necessary subscriptions. Like I went in and just canceled everything. Spotify, Pandora, whatever. Even the little guys is what I'm trying to say. And then on top of that, go to your landlords and tell them what's going on. Don't say, I'm not going to pay. I call that, it's harder if you guys have a larger landlord or, a larger mortgage bank that's covering that stuff. But 2 out of 3 of our landlords were like, don't worry about it. Just check in with me next week or next month. So being able to be straightforward, a lot of these people own those buildings outright. So it's not as much of a hit for them, and they want to see you succeed, and nobody wants to remove a climbing gym if you guys go under. So it's in their interest to support you. And one of the things with all this is if you guys do choose to keep on staff, what we've been doing, and I've been posting it in Climbing Gym Operators, is find projects for them so that you come out stronger. Don't just have people on staff doing nothing. There's a million projects out there that you can do to prepare yourselves. Like there's a lot of value add when you guys are talking about stuff. Like our yoga instructors are putting things online. I know some other gyms are doing the same thing. We're going to start doing contests and all kinds of stuff. So just like take the time. If you're going to keep people on payroll, don't let them not work. Utilize this time to come out better.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kristen. Actually, that's a absolutely perfect segue into our next question that was up in the question window, which is as people keep paying staff, are they actually working in the gym or are you just paying them? So I'd love to hear from the whole audience what your individual situations are and choices have been around that. All right, let's hear from Grant Farmer.
Hey, so at First Ascent, we've kind of limited how many people can be in the space. So we've definitely, we've had some projects, but we're very careful and attuned to staff not wanting to work, as well as like making sure that we're giving them plenty of space and not forcing anyone, making them feel like they have to come in.
Great, thanks, Grant. Let's hear from Aaron Gilmore.
Hi guys, this is Aaron Gilmore from Ascend Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. Yeah, our goal, and I said this in the questions, was our goal was to keep as many staff on and working projects as possible in the gym for as long as that was sustainable. Last night, the governor of PA mandated that no employees should be on site for non-essential, non-life sustaining businesses. So that kind of made us rethink our plan. And now we are in the process of, I guess, furloughing the majority of our hourly staff and getting them on unemployment as soon as possible. So that's kind of what we're doing.
And did you have another thought, Kristen, to share? I see your hands up.
Yeah, I'm watching the chat and the questions that are coming through, and people are asking about opt-in, opt-out, and things like that. Again, I've talked about this in Climbing Gym Operators. I come from a different perspective than a lot of gyms because we started out as a nonprofit, and so I don't see it as a service, I see it as a membership. And people are asking, should I opt out or opt in? And my answer is please, please guys, to save yourselves, choose the opt-out approach. If you don't hear from someone, assume that they want you to continue going and to continue billing them, and you can always go back and refund and or cancel if they don't want it. But the reality is that if you guys have, like, you have a membership-based service, they want you to survive. And a lot of these people are not affected by the change or not as affected to the point that they want to. I actually had somebody who does our videos who doesn't have a membership because he's not local go and sign up because he wanted to support us. And there have been a few of those. So make sure, like, don't go ahead and say, oh yeah, opt in if you want me to cancel you or you want me to cancel you. You want to make sure that people have to opt out because unfortunately, like that make that assumption, just take care of yourselves. And then those people, well, most of them understand what's going on. So that would be my advice watching this go through.
Great, thank you. And Matt Roberts, you had your hand up as well.
Yeah. So to go on, build on what Kristen just said, we're opt out. Part of it is, I mean, and this is highlighted here in the chat. Whenever we do member communication about anything, like we're lucky if we get like 3 or 4% participation. So I think whether if we have to assume we need opt-in, we're talking about 20% participation tops. What I will say is whatever we do, be very transparent. I mean, as soon as we made the decision to lay off the majority of our staff, we communicated it in all our normal channels, including on Facebook. We laid out exactly why we were doing it. We emphasized our first priority. We emphasized the owners are all cutting our pay to zero. Marriott Hotel, by the way, Marriott CEO did a great video he released online today. We emphasized we're all going to zero. We're still a small enough community. A lot of them know us. Our priority is to make sure that everybody has a job to return to. And we've had 99% great feedback. Yes, 1% are assholes, but 99% have been great about it, is the first thing I want to say. The second thing by the way, what we did, and this is what's hard, what we struggled with, is we don't, like most of you, we don't have a big HR department. So somebody was asking me earlier today on a phone call why we didn't furlough, and I'm like, we don't know what it means. There are some other ways we can handle it. One thing we did do is we're paying all benefits through the end of May. you can set that up as a severance. So there are some other ways to slice and dice. We did do layoffs, but everybody who's on our health insurance plan stays on it at least through the end of May. Informally, I've communicated to them, I'll carry it personally for them beyond that. It's not a huge benefit, but it's a great way to build morale. We've had great staff. Our staff has been very supportive. Our community, like I said, 99%. But whatever you do, like it or not, be transparent. It's going to be hard, but if we are more than just putting up big metal boxes for people to come and pull plastic on plywood, if we're really about community and being a third space, this is when you prove it. And this is when those relationships get built for a lifetime.
I wanted to add on to something Kristen and Matt just said. We're going to do this, and it kind of dovetails with what you're asking. What do you do with the staff that you've kept on? We're actually going to call every single member. Like, what else are you going to do if you're stuck in a room and all you can do is be on the phone? Call them. Like, this is no time to be shy. Ask the people for help. Like, don't just let them click a button on a screen and we're talking about opt-in, opt-out and giving them some kind of insulation. No, talk to them. This is really about community. Get on the phone. What else are you going to do? Ask them and tell them your situation. Be transparent, and you'll be surprised how much help you get. And actually having the staff do it is going to give them something to deal with the survivor's guilt that they're going to feel. And it'll help them make connections with the people around.
That's a brilliant idea, Wes. Thanks for sharing that. One quick question. I believe you've furloughed most of your employees. Are there any issues that you find in California anyway about asking them to work like that while being furloughed?
Well, furlough means they can't work. So there's a specific definition in California. So if they're going to work, we kept them on. If they're not working because we didn't have hours, we furloughed them. And like Matt said, the people that had health insurance but are furloughed, we're paying through April right now. And we're just going to take it day by day, week by week. I mean, stuff changes like every 6 hours. So you're just scrambling every time something changes.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. I just wanted to bring that as a thing of to the top of mind for people out there who might be furloughing people that you can't typically ask them to work, or pretty much almost universally across the U.S. ask them to work. Let's hear from Doug Cosby. I'm going to unmute you, Doug. And
hey, how about that?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I wanted just to chime in on staff still working. So the level of infection rates varies around the country, but it's very bad here in Charlotte where we are. The CDC recommended, I think, gathering in groups of no more than 10. We've been forced to shut down by the county health department, all gyms, health clubs, movie theaters. The governor shut down all bars and restaurants except for takeout. So we do have people in our buildings working, but we've limited those numbers. And I think you need to really take this seriously. If your area is not fully affected yet, it's gonna be, and it's gonna be really bad. And you don't want a big infection running through your staff either, because even though we thought up until recently that young people were pretty immune, it's looking like that's not the case. And you can't lose your staff. So that was my comment for being careful there. I'd like to hear from Matt. I think it's a really bad idea to borrow money to pay staff. And I'd love to hear what his comment is about that for long term. I am personally going as slow as I can in my decision making so that I'm really thoughtful about what I do. So we had been ramping up for this. On Sunday, we decided to close. On Tuesday, we were mandated to close. We have not until today actually fired all of our part-time staff so that they can start collecting benefits. And now we're working on how to stretch things out for full-timers. And I think also to mirror Matt, anybody who thinks they're going to open in the next anybody who's planning to open in the next couple of weeks is fooling themselves. It's a long haul. Look around the world at what's happening. I think you got to plan for a 3-month closure. But Matt, do you have a comment about borrowing money to pay staff?
Yeah, great points. By the way, we have a business collaborator who also has a large business in China. He reached out. He's also a member. He reached out to say we should expect an 8-week closure from when we did, based on the curve in China, for whatever that's worth. And I can send details. He sent this great, like 4-page long email of their experience in China. Anybody who wants, I'm happy to send out. And again, we were very aggressive. Part of it is because we are paying on this 85% built gym. The only way I would borrow, the only way I would borrow is once it becomes SBA approved in this emergency disaster loan. Until then, you know, once it comes to borrowing, the clock is ticking. It means you're out of cash. And like I said, in an economy right now where small businesses are not getting funded. We had a loan withdrawn. I signed a loan 2 weeks ago for a new gym. And to increase our line of funding and this other stuff, changing banks. Monday morning when I called to say, yeah, we've closed, this is what we're doing, this is our burn rate, we're great for this amount of time, blah, blah, blah. They're like, yeah, we can't do that. We're out. So, and I can tell you, I sit on a loan committee Wednesday morning. We went through, reviewed loans for a number of businesses, and we pulled also a number of those loans. The risk right now, the uncertainty is too large. I would not borrow. There's no way I would borrow to pay. There's maybe 1 or 2 I would do so. But I would get much closer, to be honest. Now that I think about it, I would get much closer to going ahead, laying them off and paying them out of my own pocket. The difference between and just helping for benefits. Helping for the out of my own pocket. Then borrow money to keep them on. That worries me. They need to have jobs to come back to, like it or not.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. We'll probably pivot soon to start talking about issues around closure specifically and member communications or any issues around members. So please start entering those questions into the question and answer box, and we'll have people speak to them. And then again, we'll keep surfacing polls throughout the call. So once you see that pop up, please fill that out and help share some information.
Just one point for everyone on the chat. I'm noticing some folks, I think the automatic setting when you're entering a chat is for it to just go to panelists. When it says 2, you can click on that and select all panelists and attendees so that everybody can see your chats.
Great, thanks, Laura. Yeah, and one thing we didn't mention about questions and answers, you can ask your question anonymously. So if you have a more sensitive question and you don't want to be identified on this call, you can do so. And if you are entering any questions in the chat box, please enter them in the question and answer section so that we make sure they get addressed by everyone. Let's see, we had a question here. Not so much on staff, but it's right on with what we were just talking about the length of time. Just in case anyone had missed it, I believe Wes was suggesting maybe plan for 3 months. The situation is developing day by day, obviously, and we don't have any concrete science or estimates about how long this will actually take. So it'd be great to hear how people are thinking about planning for their staff. Sounds like many of the folks on the panel are in the 2-month, 3-month time frame. Would anyone else like to share their thoughts on that? All right. We had another question here, and we'll kind of switch this now to talking about closures and membership issues. And the first question, which is definitely apropos for closures, how many folks are paying rent or were able to get rent deferrals? I believe Kristen spoke to that a little bit earlier, and let's hear from her first.
I didn't totally follow the question, so can you redo it for me? Sorry.
Oh, yes. The question was, let me just resurface it. Are folks having pushback from landlords when it
Oh,
comes to paying
that's
rent?
literally the one I was answering.
Okay.
So we have two different types of landlords in our locations. We have small businessmen who are kind of at the end of their career, who outright own the buildings. And both of them are super responsive and care about me personally. Like I sent an email and then one of them called me. And those people have forgiven us for rent for the next month. That's all I asked for. And then I just said I'd check in, and I made sure that I double checked that and sent an email to confirm what we said, so they had a record of it. We also have one rental location that's they're terrible. They're a really large landowner. They don't care if they put us out of business, and they've been sending passive aggressive emails to us about, like, just so you know, insurance isn't going to help you here. Just so you know, this is going to happen. So we're prioritizing, when we do our budgeting, we're prioritizing making sure we pay them because they're going to get us. So you just got to really make a decision about who your bills are going to and what the long term is going to be. And like you said, we're planning on like probably a 3-month closure. So making a decision about where that needs to go and what we need to be doing while we're at it. The interesting thing is that gym has some of our strongest employees in terms of their capability of doing stuff on the side. So I'm really going to make sure I support them and keep those people employed.
Okay. And Doug, let's hear from you.
Yeah, and Matt, I'd also be interested in hearing Matt's comments, but we own our buildings, but we have a lot of debt. And I talked to we bank through BB&T. I've already gotten a 100% pledge to go interest-free for 3 months. And I've gotten a 99% pledge to go interest and principal free for 3 months. With that just being added to the end, I've got like 12 years on one and 15 on another. They know we're in a really good place economically or financially, so they know that we're long-term a good cause. A lot of people are going to have a much shakier situation. But I think to Kristen's point, you know, I question, oh gosh, should I go talk to the bank? You need to go talk to the bank. You need to go talk to the landlords. You just need to lay it out. If people aren't going to work with you, then you need to know that now, in my opinion. But Matt, any other comments for people because most of these companies have debt, some through SBA. I don't know, do we have any idea what SBA will do at this point?
So here's the one thing, and for better or for worse, through 4 different companies that I either work for, own, or consult, in the last 3 months, I've been involved with debt negotiations on 8 different gyms. Here's what I've learned. There's a lot of people who tell you, oh, this is the rule. There is so few actual rules here. I've been told hang on just a second, it's raining hard and low again. I've been told exactly different things by lenders from the same bank in different cities. It's bizarre. Anyway, what I can tell you in general, SBA will be the easiest. Okay, so generally, particularly as we go through this, going to interest-only payments in SBA loans for 90 days will be trivial. Call them. You don't want to assume this. Call, be upfront, just like everybody said, but that's going to be trivial. I think most of them will be fine with interest and principal deferment for 90 days. The conventional loans are much, much trickier. Right now, FDIC regulations create some really large disincentives for banks to make modifications on conventional loans. It permanently puts you in a bad bucket in the bank, that the banks have to leave you in that bad bucket permanently. It also effectively hurts the bank's credit rating with the FDIC and changes their own, like their insurance stuff. So these are some big issues. If you're SBA, it's going to be a lot easier to get those loans deferred, but call your banker, start talking. Even on our conventional loan, we're going to be able to go interest only, I think 90 days, but we have a good relationship with our existing bank. It's making me more thankful for that. It's also making me in the future I'm going to be much more open to SBA loans. I used to dislike them a lot more than I do now. I regret not having more SBA.
One little clarifying question, if you guys are comfortable sharing, either Matt or Doug, who've already made some of these arrangements, are you extending the term of those loans, or is there now a balloon payment due at the end, if you don't mind sharing?
For most banks are just going to extend. When you defer, the easiest thing to do is say if you get a 90-day deferment, they're just going to stretch 3 months onto the back of that term. They're not going to mess with balloons. They're not going to, because you're fundamentally changing the structure of the loan. Typically, they're not even going to want to re-amortize for the same term. Most of the time, if they're going to push it back, certainly with SBAs, I shouldn't say that. I'm pretty sure with SBAs, the common thing is going to be if every month you defer, it's just going to add another month on the term at the end. But it's crazy. Talk to your banker, and don't think if the first answer sucks, you won't get a different answer. The other thing to remember is banks, landlords, nobody wants to own a climbing gym, okay? They want you to succeed. They want to get paid. And they're willing to wait to get paid instead of force the money now and or push you out of bankruptcy or push you into bankruptcy.
Okay. And Kristen, what are your thoughts?
I don't have thoughts on that, but it does kind of correlate. I've just been watching a lot of questions, and I'm not the one to ask, and I know Matt has to leave, so he might be the one. People are asking about, what about canceling insurance? What's CWA and Monument doing? I think that's a pretty valid question.
Great. Well, we do have Will Jorgensen on the line from Monument, so I'll ask him to speak on that a little bit. But I'll say from the CWA side, we've been, and they're probably annoyed by this, but we've been talking to them almost every day for the last 2 weeks. So, Will?
Hey guys, to provide a basic update, we are encouraging everyone to go ahead and file loss of income claims with their insurance company, whether they work through us or another agency. That being said, it's our opinion that coverage will likely be declined based on a standard exclusion form that's on just about every policy in the country. But at least going through this process, we'll continue to put pressure on the various carriers. We fully expect this to end up in the courts and possibly go a similar route to how the Terrorism Risk Insurance Act was actually put together. Now, aside from that, we've been in conversation with all insurance carriers on both the liability, property, and work comp side of things to come up with a plan of attack to provide relief for all clients. Those discussions are still underway. We'll probably have an update early next week on what we can do, and these relief options will take any number of forms. It could be cancel rewritten policies with credits. It could be midterm adjustments on premiums. It could be deferred payments. Right now, they're working as fast as they can to put together a solid plan to provide options for everyone. Aside from that, we do encourage people to keep their coverage in place. Usually you will have some form of exposure still from a premises liability perspective, but also still having property exposures, regardless of the loss of income claim and how it applies to viral pathogen. But that is the current status, and as I said, we should have more to provide the CWA and their members by early next week.
Yeah, I'd add on that as well. And there were a couple questions about this, but the CWA is definitely gearing up its advocacy efforts. We're going to start lobbying, making sure that both on a state level and a federal level, climbing gyms are part of any conversation when it comes to recovery plans, any assistance that's available. And Monument's been working very hard on their side on those lobbying efforts around insurance specifically. So we'll be partnering up with them to make sure that as new legislation is in the works and as any lawsuits form as response to claims that get probably denied in the future, that we have the full weight of the industry behind us. And we'll cover some of the other advocacy efforts a little bit later in the call as well.
And Garnet, to add one last element for any gym owners, members of the community who are out there, now is the time to reach out to, local government, even your senator or congressperson, and start putting the word out. We've been speaking with various groups, both on a local jurisdictional level, but federal level as well. We're aware of a few states who are trying to rush through legislation, including New Jersey, but I don't think it's made it out of committee yet. But this is in the works, and so now is the time to start calling folks if you know anyone in government.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Will. And I see.
Oh, Garnet, I was just going to say,
sorry.
I filed a loss of income claim, and I got a call the next day, and they denied me about 45 seconds. But I think it will get everyone in line in case some of this legislation does happen.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that and what Will said earlier, they're strongly encouraged. Monument, from everything I've heard, is strongly encouraging everyone to file claims, no matter, even if you are just absolutely sure you're going to get denied, just file the claim. Yeah.
So I have a quick question, and then I need to go. I have actually one question for Will, but I want to reiterate a point that he made, which is particularly around insurance. And Will can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'm correct here. That is almost entirely legislated at the state level. So while very few of us probably have members that are federal legislators, though probably a few of us do have some connections, the state legislators, just like what's going through New Jersey, that's a state thing. And there are lots of potential litigation paths here. So do reach out. Just to reiterate, it doesn't have to be, your federal congressperson. In fact, for some of these business income, your state's probably going to matter more. One question to Will, and then I'm going to head out. Is business interruption, is it one of the default choices for gym insurance in the CWA plan? Is it an opt-in or opt-out?
Gotcha. So that coverage, it's sometimes called business income coverage or loss of income coverage. It's usually a component of property insurance. It's certainly included on every property quote that we try to provide, though people can opt out of the coverage. And the CWA program as well, obviously it's primarily designed for general liability, and we put together different options on the property side. So it could be a situation where someone chose to work with a local carrier for any number of reasons, such as regional pricing availability and, let's say, a bad wind or tornado zone. So if you do have property coverage locally, call your local agent, file the claim, keep putting pressure on all of the carrier staff to respond.
So yeah, I've got Doug. Let's hear from you.
Yeah, well, I wanted to follow up on insurance questions, but I put in for loss of income also. I have the business interruption insurance is in fact tied to my property policies, and we bought that. They only cover, for me at least, physical damage like a tornado, which almost hit our building but missed us by about 300 yards a month ago. What coverages should we absolutely not cancel? As a property owner, I'm not going to cancel my property insurance. And I want to make sure that I have enough liability insurance that if I have employees in my building, or if most property insurance covers slip and fall around the outside of the building. But any comments for us on that from Monument?
Yeah, we would recommend keeping most folks would carry 3 primary lines of coverage, property insurance, general liability, and then workers' compensation. Workers' compensation in this situation could be a very unique sort of thing. On the one hand, you usually have a state mandate to carry it depending on the number of employees you have. And, in this situation with layoffs or furloughs, et cetera, that line could certainly be blurred. And, we would recommend having a discussion with your local insurance commission on the rules if you're laying folks off. But certainly if you're going to have people, trying to do any work, even if it's just making phone calls from home, similar to what Wes suggested, technically they are doing work on behalf of the company. Liability insurance, even if you're not necessarily there or open for business, there's always the premises liability exposure, such as a slip and fall related claim in the parking lot, someone breaking in or sneaking in, kids who want to, and then of course the property exposure, you're not necessarily there, but if the building still burns down, you'd want to have that coverage in place. So what we're really focused on right now is coming up with solutions to have the burden of insurance reduced for all clients. And again, that will probably take on any number of forms, and we should have more information early next week.
All right. Thanks, Will. We've got about a little bit over 15 minutes left.
Real quick, can I interrupt real quick?
Yes.
There's questions on the chat that I think are good ones, which is, and this is for Will and Matt, why file business interruption if it's probably going to be rejected?
Sure. So part of it is to continue to put pressure on the carriers. It's also to try to force them to make different coverage determinations. It could be a situation where local jurisdictions pass law. So in this case, we'll use New Jersey as an example. They are trying to push through a law that forces all insurance companies to respond and pay those loss of income claims, regardless of the policy language. And putting it through certainly puts you in line and can help speed that process up. But beyond that, using 9/11 as kind of an example, things like war, things like nuclear fallout, things like terrorist attacks, those were always standard exclusions on insurance policies. No one really ever anticipated anything of that magnitude to happen. And it certainly wasn't necessarily the carrier's intention to deny claims, but the policy language certainly made that the case. It took government intervention to basically force the carriers to pay out claims and then reimburse them to keep them whole. And once you have an event, then you can statistically start to rate for it, charge associated premiums for optional coverage, and create new coverage forms. Again, this will be a long, drawn-out process that we anticipate will end up in the courts. But the more pressure that can be put on the industry and government now, the better.
To quickly answer that, and then I agree with everything, but to summarize, one other slight different, it creates data. So it creates data in places that it's really easy for legislators to see it. Those numbers are already there. There's at least a first pass. So the people like Monument, like their counterparts all over, are going to be able to say, look, this is what we've heard from our clients. It's here. This is it. And that makes it a lot easier for legislators to react.
We also have Mark from Monument just joined us recently, and I'm sure he'd like to weigh in on this as well. All right, might be slight technical difficulty. Mark, just raise your hand when you're ready.
I've talked to Chris Fox. Mark's works with Mark. I have a little bit of an understanding, and then Mark can correct me if I'm wrong. But the way that our policies generally work is that after the SARS pandemic, actually from a few years ago, it was put as an exclusion, pandemics, in almost every policy in the country. So even though there's language that says there's like act of God, it's already a carve out in the policy that you sign. And then as far as the interaction between government mandate and pandemic, the way it's been explained to me is that government mandate overlays over the pandemic exclusion. So what that means is you have to have underlying coverage that would cover your property And then if the government does something on top of that, then it will cover you. So a good example would be like the fires here in Malibu. Like if the city of Malibu cut off access to your building so you couldn't open, then the government mandate would cover you because you had fire protection. And you get something for that difference. But in this case, like one of the comments is just going to be a fight about the pandemic pretty much.
Yeah. Do we have you on the line, Mark? I think we got some technical difficulties there. We've got a couple people with their hands raised. Let's hear from Brian Pletta.
Can you hear me, Garnett?
Yep.
Okay, great. I just wanted to kind of go back and talk about the loan deferments. So our local SBA certified development company, we have a couple of SBA 504 loans, which are property loans. We're a landlord and tenant in our business, and they actually reached out to us just this week and let us know that as just an inherent part of our 504 loan, there is an automatic ability to do a 6-month deferral of those loan payments. And at least locally, our SBA connection, the CDC, is making that very easy for us to apply for. So it would be, my understanding is it defers all loan payments, principal and interest, for up to 6 months. And then once it kicks back in, they will amortize those additional payments over a period of up to 8 years. And, you know, those things are selectable. They're recommending right now that we choose to defer for 3 months so that we have another 3 months later should this come around again next fall or winter and we're in this situation again. And then do the amortization over the 8-year period, which is the max for that 504 loan. Then we've also talked to our local bank who holds the commercial part of that 504 loan. It's kind of like a half SBA, half conventional loan. And they are trying to work with us to at least defer principal payments at this time. And we'll see what that happens with that. But they haven't made a firm commitment on that yet, but they are talking to us about it.
All right, thank you, Brian. We also have Blair Williams as well to share some ideas. You there, Blair? All right. So we have about 10 minutes left. Please keep typing in any questions you have. If we don't get to them on this call, we will.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Oh,
or?
there we go. You got it. Yep. Go for it, Blair.
Gotcha. Hey, thanks so much for your vision and hosting this meeting. It's incredibly valuable, even for me as a manufacturer. Wesley basically touched on every point that I wanted to comment on. And so I would be curious to hear Monument's response in regards to that, because my experience is the same, that all insurance policies now post-SARS have an exclusion, and they specifically call out viruses and pandemics. But first, my understanding was if there is a government or a local regional mandate, as an example, to shut your business down, then that would kind of override that and possibly open up an opportunity for making a claim.
Okay. Is Mark or Will prepared to speak to that?
That is certainly an argument that we make, and another reason we keep encouraging everyone to file a claim. But for everything we've seen, and we've talked to underwriters at maybe a dozen carriers nationwide, and even a few international carriers, just to get feedback on what's happening in Europe. They seem to be holding a pretty staunch line that the virus or pathogen exclusion form will override any other available coverage form. But if anyone has, received coverage or someone has made a determination, then that is news that should be shared with everyone, so that everyone can, try to duplicate that and continue making the arguments.
Okay. Thank you. We've got a couple other questions that popped up. One is about a fairly specific loss of income question, and I would say the best thing to do is contact your insurance provider directly for that. And anyone who has like very specific questions, it's best just to call either Monument or whoever your carrier is directly. The other question I see that was surfaced in there is around just general communications and marketing. So basically they're asking, how do you communicate to your members that they should stay on board with you if you also have to lay off staff? And how do you navigate the challenge of moving those people out of the community, at least perceptually, and asking your members to stay in the community? All right. Has anyone had objections from members in those issues in that regard?
Hey Garnet, Casey in the chat box said to the panelists, but it should have gone to everyone, is to be as honest as possible. I think that's the rule you should use. Just tell everyone what you're doing as much as you feel comfortable. I think for some of us that closed early in markets that had to close early or chose to close early, you got more of this like turbulence or chatter from making the decision and how to balance it. But I think as more and more people know people who've been laid off in other industries, I think this becomes less and less of an issue, as long as you're honest with people about what you're doing. Like if you can afford to keep people on, or you choose to because you think that's the best for your business, you tell them that's what you're doing. I think if you're just if you communicate to everyone that you're just doing the best that you can, and that there's really no right answer, because nobody knows what the right answer is. We're all just trying, and you communicate that, I think that goes a long way.
All right, and Kristen, if you can share some thoughts on that as well.
Can you ask again? My internet froze.
Oh, sorry. So we're talking about the challenge of navigating the issue where you're asking members to stay in the community and to keep their membership live, but at the same time having to lay off or furlough staff and possibly perceptually excluding them or distancing them from the community.
So one of the things that I chose to do, and again, this informs because I was a nonprofit, and I'm very liberal with our numbers. I'm liberal with our situation because as a nonprofit, we had to make public what our numbers were before we turned into a for-profit. When I sent out my email, I straight up said, it costs us this amount of money to keep operating, whether we have staff or not. And maybe it's not the amount of money, but one of the things that I've seen, and I'm fortunate in that I'm in a lot of different industries. We still run an event business also. And we've seen a lot of things like that. And what I'm really finding is people don't really understand what the implications are. So I think the more clear, not just being honest, but being clear, like this is this step, this is how this is going, this is where we're gonna be spending our money. So if we end up having to furlough our employees, that's what I would be doing, is I'd say, okay guys, now's the time we're furloughing our employees. This is what we're gonna be using your membership money for. And I think that educational piece is really important. And then also switching it and saying, look at all the value that we're giving you while you're suspended. When you come back, we're gonna, gosh, I wanna say, what was his name? Jesse Waldorf was like, we're gonna have a grand opening party. I was like, yeah. So that kind of set off that. So the more you can communicate very clearly what you're doing, not just we're taking care of our members and our employees, that's the key, I think.
All right, that's awesome. Thank you, Kristen. So we're gonna transition now just to wind down the last 5 minutes and cover some of the communications plans that we have for you guys so that we can keep the community connected and all of these great ideas circulating for all of the owners out there. I'll have Laura speak to this.
Yeah, thanks Garnet, and thanks everyone for your participation on this call. I hope it's been really helpful for you. We at the CWA, I think by now you guys probably have all heard that the CWA Summit is canceled for this year. We're working on some plans that we'll hopefully be able to announce soon about membership and the CWA's future plans. But what we can say right now is that all three of us here at the CWA have transitioned our time to working 100% on what we can do to help you guys through this. So we're going to be keeping everybody updated via email with regular updates. You can sign up if you're not already receiving our emails at this URL, climbingwallindustry.org/lines. We'll also be posting updates on social media. We are planning to organize more of these community calls. We'll be focusing them on various topics. I think we could spend a lot of time focusing in on specific areas. And we're going to be trying to get content experts who can help speak to those specific areas over the coming weeks and months. And the last thing is we're creating a centralized hub on our website where we'll be able to link off to all of our webinars, articles, FAQs, and advocacy efforts as those are all developed. Right now, you can go to climbingwallindustry.org/coronavirus, and we have our FAQ up there. We're going to be transitioning that into this hub and providing all of these resources in one place.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. There's a poll up right now just to gauge how this call went for everyone. Yeah, please fill that out and give us feedback. And also, any questions that didn't get addressed, those will probably be the genesis for future calls and for specific topics that we narrow in on. If you guys ever do have any suggestions for other areas you'd like us to discuss, definitely feel free to email or contact us to let us know what we can do for you. And as Laura mentioned, we're gearing up to focusing all our efforts on advocacy and what we can do for you guys. So I'll have Alexandra cover some of the options that we currently have right at this moment.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So yes, there is a question that's been waiting very patiently to be answered about if the CWA is pursuing advocacy efforts or lobbying efforts on behalf of our industry. The answer is absolutely. So just to give you a little bit of background about what's happening right now, the CWA has investigated to see if there is a local or a national business association working on local or federal legislation or working on an advocacy campaign to pressure legislature. So for example, petitions, letter writing, etc. If we found one that was pre-existing, we planned to contact them to learn more about their campaign and see if it made sense for the CWA to join their efforts. Thus far, we haven't found anything that aligns in that way, so we're building our own campaign. Of course, we're stronger in numbers, so I'm also developing a list of associations, organizations, and groups that are like ours and share similar concerns with which we could partner. I am currently constructing a campaign outline and contacting potential partners to invite them to join us in coalition to mobilize their members alongside ours so that we can pressure legislators to pass business financial relief legislation that's favorable to our industry. We'll have more information for everyone shortly, and we'll actively communicate any updates to all members. There is an opportunity to volunteer to assist these efforts, and if you're interested, please sign up through the volunteer registration form. Most volunteer support will be aimed toward addressing local and regional efforts. And for any questions, concerns, or contributions that you might have to make immediately, for example, if you have a connection with a decision maker and you'd like to put us in contact, please submit those to advocacy@climbingwallindustry.org, and I'll personally get back to you as quickly as possible.
Great, thank you. So yeah, we're going to wrap up right on time here. Great job, everybody. As we mentioned, we're going to try to create an ongoing series of webinars and community calls like this. So yeah, please get in touch with us about any topics that you might want to cover. The next one that we are planning, just so you know, is going to be Monday at 10 a.m. and we'll have an emergency medicine physician on hand to answer some questions about general pandemic questions if you have them, but also touch on areas about cleaning and sanitizing different parts of the gym. So yeah, think about those questions. Please join us on Monday, and then we'll start scheduling the next calls very soon. All right, and that will conclude. So thanks again, everybody, and thanks to all our panelists for all of your great thoughts.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.